It's wild to me, right? Because I think sometimes even Browns fans will discount something I'm saying that's logical, that you could back up with numbers, that you can back up with other non-Browns fan opinions and tools, and think that I'm just saying stuff because I'm a Browns fan. One thing I do not do, and one thing some of you guys acknowledge that I do not do on this channel, is force optimism for situations that I honestly believe won't work out. If I thought this Browns roster was terrible, I would not be sitting here telling you that this roster is good, because I'm not going to lie. There's no fun in lying about stuff like that, right? When I had faith in Baker Mayfield, that's a perfect example. I pushed him. I thought he was going to be good. But then when he showed me that, some of the stuff that was in 2019 and the early parts of 2020 and the later parts of 2018 that were issues that we felt like we're going to get fixed, but 4 years in, wasn't enough done to fix those things, then I had to make the move to say, hey, I don't think he's going to be the future for this team. I am willing to change my mind based on what I see. I am willing to look at things and try to be as fair as possible. Will I be a little bit more optimistic just because, yes, it is my team and I don't want to cheer for misery? Absolutely. But I don't say nonsense just to be optimistic. I say things that are genuinely backed up. Whether I'm wrong or right, I make sure that my process is not flawed. And one of the things I've been pushing lately, right, and telling y'all lately, well, I've been telling y'all a couple of things. We'll talk about the other one when that news drops. But one of the things I've been pushing lately is, hey, this roster is really good. And the idea that people are going doom and gloom if Deshaun Watson gets suspended for a quarter of the season, 3/4 of the season, or even the whole season, I feel like it's quite ridiculous. And people have pushed back. Some people see my point. Some people who have pushed back respectfully have said that everything hinges on the quarterback, that if you don't have a top 5 quarterback, that you can't be a playoff contender. And there is some truth to that, right? If you don't have a great quarterback, you're probably not going to win the Super Bowl unless everything absolutely falls right in place. Then you might have a chance. And that's very rare. And that doesn't happen very often. So you don't have the greatest chance. But when you talk about wasted season, well, what's a wasted season? Because I'm not going to hear from fans that have told me their entire lives that they just want the team to be decent and not be a laughing stock, that a playoff contending team is a wasted season. And whether Jacoby Brissett's started for the whole season or if Deshaun Watson's out there for however long, this team's going to be a playoff contender because the roster's that good. So how can anybody sit here and tell me that this season's going to be a wasted season? And my point to back that up is, if you look at this roster, there's not a lot of parts on this that you are guessing are going to be good. You know that these pieces are good in this offense, in this defense. It's not a lot of guesswork. So, I've said that, and I've said that for the last few weeks, and Pro Football Focus dropped their roster rankings for all 32 teams. Now, if I'm being biased, then Pro Football Focus, in my opinion, on the Browns roster should be way off, right? That the Browns won't be a top 10 roster. Well, let's see what Pro Football Focus has these rosters ranked as, and let's see their process on how they rank them, right? I think that's also very important to check out. A lot of people complain about rankings. They don't check out the process, and they misunderstand what's going on with the ranking. So let's look at Pro Football Focus, right? They're ranking all 32 teams, a collaboration with ESPN Plus. And here is their criteria, right? With the 2022 NFL draft behind us and free agency as well, we are breaking down each team's roster using the Pro Football Focus database with an eye towards the projected starters. We looked at both PFF grades from the 2021 season, a number included for every projected starter, and a more comprehensive assessment of the player's career. Again, I'll read that part again because that's the main criteria. I'll even highlight it for y'all. With the 2020, that's not the most important part. We looked at both the PFF grades from the 2021 season, a number included for every projected starter, and a more comprehensive assessment of each player's career using both PFF grades and statistics. So there's a little bit of opinion that goes into this ranking, but a lot of this is just based off of what PFF has already charted and graded. That's important to note, right? So there is not as much bias in here. One, the idea that PFF is going to be Browns bias for whatever reason makes no sense. But this is not a biased way to get to these numbers. This is just their process. You can agree with it, disagree with it, but this is how they got there. Now, a further explanation of the PFF grade rubric, if you were around at the end of the season, you are very familiar with this rubric, as I did a bunch of videos charting a bunch of quarterbacks under this rubric, right? 90+ grade of a player counts as elite. 80 to 89, good, high quality. 70, 79, average. 69 and lower or below average. And then you get to like 50 and below, and that's just trash. But I don't think a team's going to come in lower than that. Now, another thing to note, right? And this is the asterisks. They have asterisks marked here. So for rookies and players not active or barely active in 2021, we use college grades or NFL grades from earlier seasons. NFL grades from 2020 or earlier are marked with 1 asterisk. College grades are marked with 2 asterisks, and college grades from 2020 are marked with 3 asterisks. So that is how they're handling players who were either injured or did not play. That's obviously going to come into hand when we talk about the Cleveland Browns. Now, again, that's the criteria. I haven't showed you the rankings yet. I just wanted to show you the process. So you know that this isn't some random dude writing a list of 1 to 32 teams. This is how they rank things based off of the criteria that they have graded throughout the years. They've accumulated this data, and now they're just ranking it as that data says. They have strengths, weaknesses, and X factors, so you can have something in the article that's a little editorialized, but how they got to this ranking is fairly statistically based. It does not mean it's going to be 100% accurate, but it does mean that it's more free of bias than if I ranked all 32 teams based on no process. So there is a process involved here. That being said, who's the number 1 team? The Buffalo Bills, right? They cite Josh Allen as a strength. The weaknesses here, I'm not going to read out every other team, but I'm just going to scroll through them. Number 2, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You can see them. Number 3, the Los Angeles Chargers. Remember, they traded for Khalil Mack. They have Joey Bosa. They have a very, very impressive roster. All right, we go to number 4, the defending champions, the Los Angeles Rams, check in here at 4 for obvious reasons. They have Aaron Donald. They have a good quarterback. They have a lot of good players on that team. They're going to rank highly. Number 5 is the Green Bay Packers. And then we get to number 6, and what is this? The Cleveland Browns. Now, if my memory serves me right, the Packers were a championship contender. The Rams won the championship. The Chargers were Chargers, so they're thought of to be a championship contender at the very least. The Buccaneers are definitely a championship contender, and the Bills are definitely looked at as a championship contender. And the Browns at 6 are championship contenders, are high up here, right? Number 6. Now let's read through why PFF feels like the Browns are number 6. Ironically, Baker Mayfield's number. You make a joke at your own peril. All right. Here's what they say for strengths. Few teams have invested more in their offensive line than the Cleveland Browns. Few teams have a better running back room than the Cleveland Browns. The result is one or more of the devastating rushing attacks in the NFL. The Browns have averaged 4.8 yards per design rushing attempt in the past 2 seasons under coach Kevin Stefanski. For those of you who think Kevin can't coach, 4.8 yards per design rushing attempt under the last 2 seasons with Kevin Stefanski. There's a little coaching involved with that, which is tied for the highest in the league with Baltimore Ravens. The right side of the Cleveland Browns offensive line, Wyatt Teller and Jack Conklin, is an excellent run blocking tandem. Their biggest weakness, Jadeveon Clowney's return on a 1-year deal helped solidify the defensive end spot. Defensive tackle is a different story. There's a lot of unknown guys there, right? They point out Jordan Elliott, Taven Bryan, Perion Winfrey. As much as I love him, he's unproven at this point. Sheldon Day, Tommy Togiai will be battling out for snaps in 2022, but none of them profile as high run-stuffing defensive tackles that the Browns need to produce in light boxes that the defensive coordinator, Joe Woods, likes to operate out of. Cleveland's defensive tackles have earned the 5th lowest PFF grade out of any interior defensive line group in the league the last few seasons. Part of that's by design, right? But that's a fair point. If you're going to say that's the Browns' biggest weakness, that's what a lot of people would agree is their biggest weakness. The X factor for the Cleveland Browns in 2022, A lot of focus in at wide receiver will be placed on Amari Cooper, David Bell. Nonetheless, 2022 is going to be a big season for third-year wide receiver Donovan Peoples-Jones, the five-star recruit, nearly averaged 19 yards per reception for the first two NFL seasons with some impressive highlight reel, explosive body control passes or receptions. The Browns will be counting on another jump from Peoples-Jones this season after he saw his targets increase from 20 to 58. In 2021, we can go here and see Deshaun Watson. He has an asterisk on his grade, and let's not discount the fact that, look, Deshaun Watson obviously helps the grade get higher and puts him in the top 6 because they're accumulating and adding that grade in when it comes to that factor. So don't think that Deshaun Watson had nothing to do with this, but you're still the 6th best roster in the NFL, and it's not like you're being carried by that 92 that Deshaun Watson had, right? And that's Deshaun Watson's best year of his career. They're taking, 2020 for that year. Myles Garrett at a 92, Kareem Hunt, Nick Chubb. You got guys with some high, fantastic grades here on PFF, and that's why the Browns are ranked 6th in the NFL. And here's another point I'll bring up. Well, there are 2 points I'll bring up. One, ain't it crazy how every time we talk about a breakout player on any side of the ball, we got like 5 different guys we think could break out? Grant Delpit, JOK. Some people think Greg Newsome can still break out some more, right? Like Perion Winfrey is one of those guys that people think can break out. And then we go to the offensive side of the ball. Harrison Bryant, David Njoku, Dearness Johnson is somebody who's a quality candidate for a breakout. They just mentioned Donovan Peoples-Jones. David Bell is there, right? So not only does this team have a lot of established talent, but they have a lot of young budding talent that's looking to break out. It's a recipe for a well-built roster, Sorry about that. And that's a recipe for a good team. Look, feel how you want to feel about how the Browns handled the quarterback position. That's not what I'm debating right now. If you look at the entire roster as a whole, if you take one step back from your personal feelings about the quarterback position, whether you're upset about leaving Baker Mayfield or you're upset about trading for Deshaun Watson, given all of his offseason stuff, if you take a step back from that, you look at how this roster is constructed, you look at how this team has went about roster construction for the last 2.5 years, you cannot tell me this is not a well-run organization. You cannot tell me that. I have seen and been through the Browns when they were terribly ran. And some people think they were terribly ran during the Sachi years. That was actually better well ran than what they were before Jimmy Haslam bought the team, or right when Jimmy Haslam bought the team, right? You want to know dysfunction? Go back and try to relive the Mike Lombardi years. Go back and try to relive the Joe Banner years. Go back and remember Ray Farmer, right? Like the outright dysfunction that led to drafting Johnny Manziel and Justin Gilbert in the first round in 2014 when literally 22 of the 32 picks were Pro Bowlers. You drafted 2 dudes who didn't make it to 2016. That is outright dysfunction. Some people are trying to say that this front office is incompetent or dysfunctional because they have strong personal feelings for good reasons on the Deshaun Watson trade side. Like, if you feel that way about that, I don't really got much to say to you on that. But on the Baker side, I don't feel like it's as valid as that, right? If you're just upset that they moved on from Baker Mayfield, because I think it was a good argument that you needed to move on at that point. But people have wrapped up everything into that they have not zoomed out and seen the whole picture, which is Andrew Berry has been a breath of fresh air for this organization. And what that breath of fresh air is competence. They are very competent. They have replacements for every old player on the roster. They have replacements at every position. They have dudes who can step up. They have drafted well over the last 3-4 years. Like, how many first and second round picks over the last 3 drafts can we point to as complete bust? The closest thing you can say is Jedrick Wills, and Jedrick Wills is still really good. That's the closest you can get. Maybe Grant Delpit, but he was good when he played last year. He just got hurt his first year. And people tried to tell me that this is a poorly run organization. Look, that's not true. This roster is built, if Baltimore were building this roster, if Pittsburgh were building this roster, if New England were building this roster, if any team that had a reputation previously for being excellent were building this roster, people would say is great. An example of their excellence, that they have a roster that could withstand losing a guy like Deshaun Watson for a whole year. That would be a credit to those guys. But since it's the Browns, nobody actually believes it, which is fair, right? The Browns got to prove it before people actually start to believe it. But we look at places like Baltimore, and we can actually say that they've done a worse job of building around their franchise player than the Cleveland Browns have. And they haven't had a franchise quarterback yet, right? So there is that. A lot of stuff gets said about the job that Andrew Berry has done over the last few months. And I think a lot of people are missing the wide point, which is Andrew Berry is fantastic at his job. Kevin Stefanski is better at his job than people give him credit for, especially the Baker diehards, but he's good at his job. And the fact that you have a quarterback who may or may not play and you still have a really good roster tells you that you're built different than most Cleveland Browns teams in the past, because this team is not just built around the strength of the quarterback. The strength of this team is its running game. The strength of this team is its defense and its secondary. If Deshaun Watson plays, that's more cream on the cookie. It's fantastic on the field perspective, right? Because he is a fantastic football player, but it ain't the whole cookie. And we need to stop acting like that. By the way, I just want to point out, Browns are 6. You didn't see any AFC North teams before that, right? Cincinnati Bengals went to the Super Bowl. They're 8th. Good team. Good team. You know what I mean? I don't even want to scroll all the way to Pittsburgh, but I believe Baltimore ain't even in the top 10. Baltimore's 12. You know what I mean? All these franchises that people swear are better ran than the Cleveland Browns don't have the deepness of the Browns roster. Don't have the star talent on the top that the Browns roster has. Don't have the longevity that this roster's been solid that the Browns have had. Have they executed on it? No, but you can point to specific people on why that didn't work, right? Odell, not a great trade. Baker Mayfield, up and down, right? Like, it just ended up being one of those things. Both of those were not Andrew Berry decisions, right? Those are both John Dorsey decisions. Who's in Detroit right now? And let's check in on how Detroit's doing, right? Because Detroit ain't on this list, not in the top 15. You know what I mean? But this is what I mean when I say that we cannot, whatever happens with Watson, we're going to find out in like a month or two or however long it happens. But the idea that this team stinks because Deshaun Watson ain't going to be there, that ain't how this team built. That ain't how this team built, man. This team has been built around quarterback play. Never. This team has been built to sustain, to sustain if they don't get great quarterback play for the last 3 years. And that's why their floor with Andrew Berry has been like 8 wins, right? Like, that's their floor. Even with Baker stinking it up as much as he did last year because of the injury or whatever, still 8 wins. Still a field goal and 3 interceptions and a half away from playing for the division in Cincinnati. Well, at home versus Cincinnati. That close, because this roster is that deep because of the job that Andrew Berry has done. I'm tired of the disrespect that Andrew Berry has gotten by every turn, by people who cheer for this team because they're not zooming out and seeing the whole picture on this, right? And this isn't even about the quarterback situation. I'm talking about every other position. Competence has been demonstrated at all of these positions. If the player's playing bad, if a player is iffy, we don't wait for them to stink to replace them anymore. We replace them before they stink. That's what good organizations do. It's the reason why we got 5 running backs, right? It's a reason why the Browns built the way they do. And they're a little predictable in the draft because the teams that are predictable are usually the teams that are good at this. Just saying, man, perception has not caught up with reality when it comes to how well the Browns organization is being ran. I think some people are behind the curve on that. I don't think Pro Football Focus is on this one, at least. But that's my thoughts on this article. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Y'all have a great day. Have a good night.